Great, so we have the list. Now what we want to have is my scatter plot here on the right. So again, the first thing, we have this UL here. If we want to add a chart, we need a SVG element. But if I add a SVG element here, it will be here on the bottom. So the easy way to make the SVG element appears in the right position, so it's probably here, is to use float. So you can do just here. So I'm doing that for the UL because remember, this is the class of the UL and this is the same class. So what I do here will be applied to the UL, and I can just do float left. And let's see, so you see that there is not a blank part here. It is here, so I'm gonna show you. Using the developer tools, we can inspect to see if it's really there. It's here, right? So our SVG is where it's supposed to be. Okay, so now we have our SVG and we want to implement things here. We want to create our visualization, and the ID will be this. Great. So as I said, I want to have my function to render the chart inside here. So I want, whenever the data change, I want to call this function, so I'll get a new chart. One thing that I have to take care is that I also have global variables for my chart. So I have chart is equal d3 select this. So this is my chart. So now I can start drawing. So before I be able to draw, I first have to create my scales. So let's do that. Bar X scale. That is my scale for my x-axis is equal to 3 is scale, and then we have y scale equal to 3 dot scale dot linear as well. Then we want to define the range for them. So for the x scale, the range can go from 0 to some width, but I don't have this variable yet, so I put it here on parameters. Chart width equal, I don't know, 500. Then I can use this variable here. And then the domain is basic. We can use d3 extend to get the extension of our data, that in this case is the income. So I can do return d.income for the given year. Right, so right now I created my scale. My scale is linear, and the range goes from 0 to the width of my chart. That right now I define that's 500. And also the domain is the extent of my data. So I take the minimum income to the maximum income for that given year that I specified here. So let's do the same thing for the y-axis. So my range is from 0 to some height that I don't have. So let's define as well. So I want my chart height to be equal 400. So I can use it here. So now I have my range going from 0 to my chart height, and then I have my domain being, oh sorry, first d3.extend. Here is also a d. So this is my live expectance for the given year. Great, then we have the scales. We also need scales for the size of the dot. So we can use d3 scale linear, and then in my case I'm gonna use 5 to 20, and then here is population. So this is my scale for the size of my dot. And then last, I need a scale to my color. That will be d3 dot scale dot category. Okay. So now we have all the scales that I need. We have scales for the X and Y, for the size, and for the color. Now we want to draw. So the first thing we can do is just use our chart here and do select all, circle, same thing of the li data, we want to assign the same data, enter, because for the new ones I want to append a circle. Then I want to change the attribute of this circle, the radius to be equal to function my scale for size. So basically I'm saying that the radius of the circle should be proportional to the population of that country for that given year, and who computes this proportion, this scale that I created here with this range. So the minimum one we have 5 pixels of radius, the maximum one we have 20 pixels. Okay, so we can do the same thing for the other attributes as well. So we have cx that is proportional using our x scale and is proportional for the income of the country. Then we have cy that use the y scale and is proportional to the life expectancy. And then the last one, that is the color. That is based on the region. That's not for a given year. So this should render our scatter plot. Let's see. Of course, I forgot to put the array here, so we should provide data for the extent. So we should have data here, we should have data here, we should have data here. Let's see now. Okay, so now we have kinda of a scatter plot here. The problem is the size doesn't seem perfect, and it's because we didn't change the size of the chart to reflect that. So let's do chart attribute width will be equal to our width and attribute height will be equal to height. Oh, sorry, here is chart width, here is chart height. 6 here. Okay, more or less. So the first thing problem, we are cutting some dots here, and we are cutting dots here and here. Second thing, our chart is upside down, so this should be up and not down. So let's one by one. So the first thing, let's flip the chart. Let's put this on the top. So easy as before, we can just change the order of our range elements, and then we get a chart that is up. Second thing, we can create a margin. Let's create a simple one for now. And then we can just deduct here. So then we'll be able to move this, and not just one, we have to make a bigger one. Oh, but of course, because they're not changing 0, you have to start from the margin as well. Okay, so now I move everything down. Okay, but doing this thing with the margin is not always the best way to do. So the best way is create a group, so I can put all the dots there and I can move all together. So here what I do, I create a var and I create dot group that will be equal a chart append g. So now I have a group for my dots, and instead of adding my dots directly to the chart, I can add them to the group. So we don't see any change now, but what I can do is that I can make this back to 0 and everything will move there. And then what I can do here is that I can call dot attribute transform translate, and then I can specify how much I want to translate. And because I have a margin specified here, I can use this margin, sharp margin. And then I move all the dots together with the group. Okay, the color is not working, so it's just because I have a mistake here. So now we have the region as well as color. And as I said, you can, for example, just format your circle here, doing opacity 0.9, so you can see what is behind the circles. So we're still cutting here, so let's reduce a little bit more. So what we can do is create a more advanced margin. Okay, so now I can define the margin for each side of my chart. So I want the top to be equal 20, the left to be equal 10. Here I also want to be 20 and 20. So here now I can do chart margin dot left and chart margin dot top. And I can also compute one thing, that is my chart inner. That is what is the height that is available to my dots. That is basically my height minus margin dot top minus margin dot bottom. And I can do the same thing for widget. That is basically chart widget left and right. So now I'm eliminating the margins and I compute the widget only where I want dots, and then I can use those guys in my scale. So I can use here chart inner width, and here I can use chart inner height, so I don't have to worry about margins anymore. Okay, good. So now I can see all the dots. One thing that we didn't do last week, so until here is basically what I asked for your submission, but one thing that is really weird is the size of the balls, because you see a lot of countries with the same size, and usually you don't use the radius as the definition of the size, but you will use these scales to compute the area of the circle. So then I want to convert the area to the original radius, and because the area of the circle is given by area times PR, is P times R square, so we can do the inverse here and do this value divided by pi, and we can take the square root of that. Okay, so basically I'm reversing the formula for the area, that was PR square pi R square, and now we have square root of our area over pi. Let's see. Okay, but because we are based on area right now, we can increase our range here to a more bigger area, because now it is not more radius but it's area, and we can do this one looks good. So now we can define our scale based in the area and not in the radius anymore. That's better, is more how user perceives this information. Okay, so let's review how I created that. So first we created our HTML, and we had a UL and a SVG, the UL for the list and the SVG for the chart. We used some style to style them, and then first I segmented. So it's very important to organize your code. So I segmented my data, my variables, so those are my parameters that change how things work. So for example, right now, if I change that to 2007, I can see the data for 2007. If I change for any other year that contains data, I will be able to see the data for that specific year. I want 2008. So that is a good thing about having parameters separated. Then we have global variables, and those are variables that don't change over time. You can just define, because if I define this, for example, inside the function, then we have the problem that every time we call render chart, I will add a new G to the SVG. So you have to be careful with that, making sure that the only append that happens inside the render function are the ones related to enter. And then we create a group for the dots and we translate it a little bit. And then we have the option to render the list. So we can render what we see in the left, and then we render the chart. So all this only starts by calling the function render. We have a filter, that filter to only show the countries that has all the three information for the given year, and then we render both for the filtered data. And here we are loading the data. So you see that we can leave that at the end, at the beginning. That will not make any difference on how the tree handle things. Okay, so now I would like to ask you to revise your previous assignments and try to organize better your code. Try to see if there is anything that you couldn't do, if now you can, and try to improve, make them more cohesive, because we are going to introduce some interactions in the code for the next weeks, and it's important to have the code well organized. Make sure that you are understanding your code for the next assignment.